Yeah, can you please turn on your mic, please? Yes, hello. Yeah, welcome to the Global Virtual Summit 2026, Ellen. Uh, Sorry, we can't hear you, Ellen. Can you please turn on your mic, please? Hello, Ellen. Uh, yes. Ellen, can you please wait for one more minute? Like your audio is not audible. Could you please left and rejoin in the same link, please?
All right, let's make sure my camera's off, my mic is on, and my volume is up. Can you hear me now?
Yes, not perfect. Yes, yes.
Oh, good.
Yes.
Okay.
Welcome to the Global Virtual Summit 2026, Ellen. And before going to start your session, I want to introduce you to our audience. Ellen Mahlo is a founder of Reiki with Angels, a modality she developed after first experiencing Reiki therapy in 2001 while seeking healing from a severe gluten intolerance. Between 2003 and 2004, she began integrating her Reiki training with the divine guidance, particularly from Archangel Raphael, and taught her first Reiki with Angels workshop in 2005 in Richmond, Virginia. For Ellen, Reiki with Angels is both a spiritual path and a way of being, bringing comfort, peace, healing, and insight through the graceful union of energy and angelic guidance. That was an interesting bio, Ellen, and you have done a great job. And the stage is all yours.
Okay. Thank you very much. Hi, I'm Helen Malloy, and that was an interesting little intro. Let's go ahead and share the screen so I can start the presentation. So I'm here today to talk to you not as a Reiki practitioner, although I am a Reiki practitioner. I am here to talk to you today about ownership of platforms and why women must own and control platforms. So I want to go into a little bit about my background so you can understand sort of where I'm coming from. So I used to sit at the intersection of business, art, and technology. I have a degree in fine art from Virginia Commonwealth University, and I went on after college to become a large scale IT project manager. I also worked in business analysis, and I really enjoyed both of those things. But I left that career and went off and started working in the alternative health. So things like chiropractic and acupuncture and Ayurveda and all of these things that are not as common in the United States. Certainly not in my area, which is very conservative. But I fell in love with Reiki. If you've never heard of Reiki, it's a Japanese form of healing. It's laying on of hands, and I did that for many years. What ended up happening for me was that I had some TV producers who got to know me and asked me if I could help them to build a television network. And this was a little bit out of left field for me. This happened in, I think it was year 2022, and we started talking about it. And when I first thought about it, I was like, wow, I've worked on some large projects. So I helped launch Sirius Satellite Radio, and I helped launch Capital One Canada. And I used to manage and oversee all the demographic databases for Capital One, domestic and international. But I hadn't done that for about 20 years. So I dabbled in a little bit of technology. I had done some website design in the 90s, and I've been involved in just different projects here and there, but most of my time for the past 20 years had been in the working with alternative health practitioners. So I wasn't quite sure this was really the right path for me. But I did what I do about everything. I prayed about it and I felt like this was the right thing for me to do. So I spent some time researching. And it was really in the research phase that I started to understand, I guess, some eye opening things came to light to me about women in the industry of entertainment. And, I really don't spend much time thinking about entertainment. I'm not a person that spends a lot of time watching TV or going to movies. I prefer to read books and I meditate, and I make art. I make necklaces and things like that. So I just don't think about it, I guess, the entertainment industry. I'm more connected in with the tech industry and how that works. So at first I was researching, how OTT technology works. OTT is over the top. It's basically the name for all the streaming television networks. So if you watch anything streaming like Tencent or Iki or Netflix or Hulu or Sling or whatever's out there, Roku, they all work on the same technology. It's all OTT. So I started to research OTT to learn how it worked and how all the platforms function, this, that, and the other. And as I was doing that, I kind of got a little bit of a head in the sand, situation where I wasn't able to see all of the details. And I had a really good friend who we spoke, and she said, "Hey, have you ever heard of this movie called This Changes Everything?" And I said, "No, I've never heard of that." And she said, "You have to watch it." So I'm going to show you. This is the poster for the movie. So This Changes Everything came out in 2018. And it's a documentary film about the film industry, all the way dating back to the sound, when there were no sound. There are movies that were soundless. And it goes back really far. And when there was no sound in the movies, almost all the movies were made by women. And the men ran all of the radio stations. The radio stations were becoming bigger and bigger, and they were becoming conglomerates. So people were buying up stations and creating these large media companies. As soon as they added sound into the mix of movies, everything changed. Men came in, started basically taking over the movie industry, and they put the women out of business. It was really shocking to me to hear this, because even though I had spent a lot of my career in the tech industry before I went into natural health, I I didn't experience. I guess I knew that I was one of a minority being in my 20s in the tech industry, but I guess I just moved through one thing to the next. I was a pretty logical person, and I just kind of got my job done and did my thing, and I didn't really think too much about it. So all of a sudden, I'm watching this film, This Changes Everything, and for me, it was a very eye-opening experience. So several things jumped out at me from this movie. One was that they said for every 100 movies made a year, only 0.5% are directed by women. And that was staggering to me. All I could think was, well, that would mean probably a woman would make a movie once every 8, 10, or 12 years. And men would make multiple movies every single year. And I just thought, what an awful thing to go to film school and then come out and you don't get to do the thing that you want to do because they're giving almost all the jobs to the men. So that was one of the things that jumped out at me. But the other thing that jumped out at me was when they had a woman on there, and she was a president, CEO of a company. She was retired, and she said, "Oh, this movie came out, and I thought it was going to change everything." That's where the name comes from. And she said, and then it didn't. And then the next movie came out. I thought, "Oh, this will change everything," and it didn't. And eventually she said, and then it just never changed, and I don't know why. And I just thought, well, I know why. Because you don't control distribution. You don't control the platforms. You only control the content. And barely that at that time. And that was when my thinking about all of what I was doing changed. And I started doing more research into women in my industry. And I'm very much a person who's in solidarity with my sisters in business and my sisters in entertainment. And when I understood that there was this incredible disparity in power, I realized that I could do something to change that because I can design platforms. And I know people who can help me build platforms. And that is what my talk is about today, the importance of building the platforms. I think the focus for a lot of us has been on being a creator. That's been such a rise of the creator culture in the last, especially the decade. But the problem is, if you're a creator, even if you're a very, very successful creator, or you're a successful filmmaker, you're a successful actress or singer, if you don't own the platform, you don't have control. You know, we've seen and heard so many very famous people who have lost complete control over their image, their music, all their work because they don't own it. I think someone, if I remember correctly, swindled poor Taylor Swift out of a bunch of her music, and she had to re-record it. So let's talk a little bit more about that. I'm going to go ahead and move to the next slide. So we're gonna get some numbers here. So the majority of streaming platforms globally are only about 25 to 32% of the executive leadership roles are women. That means the majority of the leadership roles are men in streaming platforms. So that means when men own these platforms, they get to be the gatekeepers of who gets on, when they get on, how they get on, what hoops they have to jump through. Well, from my perspective, that's unacceptable. We've had too many times where women have been gatekept by people who didn't have our best interests at heart. And the way women's story tell and the way men's story tell is very different. And make no mistake, everything you think of as a film is just a story. It's all a story. You can tell a story in a book, you can tell a story orally, and you can tell a story visually. And that's what films and TV shows are. They're just stories. Storytelling is the primary language we all speak. It's the language that children first learn are stories. Their mothers read them stories, their fathers read them stories, their parents tell them stories. They tell other children stories. Stories is the primary language of human beings. If we don't have control of these platforms, we don't get to tell our stories when we want, how we want, the way we want. After I started understanding this, I started paying a lot of attention. And I realized that in the entertainment industry, there's a triangle of power. There are movie studios and networks. There are creative people of all kinds, whether those are script writers, actors, videographers, editors. They're all artsy fartsy people. And then there are the distributors. And because the power lies with the gatekeepers, we have to rethink this. So I want you to start to shift your mind. I want you to stop thinking about creating and start thinking about building. This is a very different way of looking at things. So you might say, gosh, Ellen, me build something? Can I build something? You don't have to build it by yourself. That's the key. Nobody does it all by themselves. And if you think that, and you think everybody else has done that, then you won't feel empowered to do it either. What you have to realize is that you may have a skill. Maybe your skill is in user interface design. Maybe your skill is in workflow. Maybe your skill is in data. Maybe your skill is in coding. Maybe your skill is in server engineering. Maybe you have none of these skills. Maybe you're just very, very creative. Maybe it's graphics. Everything I just listed is necessary to build a platform. Everything. So in my group, there are about 14 of us that work across the globe, all the way from Alaska throughout the United States, Canada, and into Europe. And each of us does something. Each of us has different skills. We all play different roles. And what we do is we trade off. One person doesn't have a skill, another person does. And we just work toward putting together one piece at a time. We are one of the first companies that has built a bootstrap platform. We have built one component at a time. That's why we're 3 years and not yet fully launched, because we're just building one piece. And we'll have it done eventually, probably about 6 months from now. But that just because I'm building one platform doesn't mean you shouldn't build another platform. You just have to figure out what kind of platform makes sense for you. Is it some kind of a website? Is it some sort of a audio platform? Is it a video platform? Now, video platforms are a little complicated, I'll admit, but doesn't mean that it can't be done. So you just start out with one. So let's go back to some of these statistics. Women are now make up around 36% of TV creators on streaming platforms. That's a lot of women. But there's still more males. And a lot of the women don't control the platforms. That's one of the problems. So when you look at worldwide global executives in media, only around 30% of senior leadership roles are held by women. 30%. It's not a lot, ladies. It's not a lot. So we have to find ways around it. And I want to offer you some thoughts on this. One of the things I've seen, and it was demonstrated very much in the movie that I talked about earlier, This Changes Everything, was that the women started fighting for their right to have their voices heard. That's rarely how any change happens. It's not that it's not worth fighting to have your voice heard and your opinion expressed, but what's actually much stronger is to replace an old system with a new one. I want you to think about technologies. See, I'm a little long in the tooth, girls. I'm almost 57. So I remember when there were 8-track tapes. Some of you probably have no idea what I'm talking about. 8-track tapes were replaced by cassette tapes. Cassette tapes were replaced by DVDs. DVDs were replaced by streaming music. Who knows what comes next? AI music? I don't know. The point is, each of those things ended up disappearing because something better came along and took its place. That's the direction we need to be thinking. Build something better to come along and replace something that doesn't work, that doesn't serve most people on this planet. Everything has gone global. I remember when there were websites for the first time. I remember seeing .com on trucks would drive by and they'd say Coca-Cola.com, this .com. And I remember I didn't know what .com was. And so I was standing on the street and I said to somebody, do you know what that means? And they said, that's the internet. I said, what is the internet? Well, I've never heard of this. And that was how we are today. We are at an inflection point. We're at a time of great change. And with chaos comes order. So you can either be part of the chaos or you can be part of the order. It's up to you. Let's get some more statistics in here, ladies. All right. So in C-level roles worldwide, women are holding roughly 29% of C-level roles. That's still not a lot. We're 50% of the population, and yet we have less than 30% of the roles. Globally, C-level, I'm sorry, that was for the US, I think. So globally, it's even worse. It's like 18%. And then there's some with CEOs for Fortune 500, it's like 16%. So when you have a lot of CEOs that are not female, you have a really different way of driving business forward. Women tend to be more creative. We tend to problem solve better. We're more collaborative, and we're less prone to start arguments with people and start wars and create problems with other people. So I know for me, I always look for win-win solutions, but I don't always meet other people that do. And usually it's men from New York City. So I used to be a corporate negotiator. So as we move forward and we think about platforms, I want you to think about education, because that's where the two things intersect. So if you're thinking about building something, you just can start simple by brainstorming ideas in a notebook. It doesn't have to be complicated, ladies. Just start brainstorming things. I'll give you some examples for me. As I start thinking about the way my platform is going to work that we've built, we realize that we need a webinar system that's really sophisticated. So start looking around. Where is a webinar system? Can Zoom do this? Can GoToMeeting do this? What does this? And we found out that we had a hard time finding something that did exactly what we needed it to do, because we needed a high degree of one-on-one interactions and we needed feedback groups. And there wasn't anything that automated that for 500 or more people into feedback groups. So we're looking at putting that together for ourselves and building that technology so we have exactly what we need with a lot of intelligence integrated into the system. So anyway, I want you to start thinking about that. And remember, there's a tremendous amount of online courses now. And a lot of them are free. There's Sailor, I think it's Sailor Institute is free. And they take a lot of their course material from top colleges in the United States. And top colleges worldwide. I think there's not United States. So you've got to wrap your head around this. The other thing that's your friend in building platforms is brainstorming sessions. If you're not even sure what to do, brainstorm with somebody. Look, and if I know all of you've got somebody in your life who's technological. Maybe it's a brother, maybe it's a cousin, maybe it's your best childhood friend, maybe it's your brother-in-law, who knows? Maybe it's your sister-in-law. Start brainstorming with people ideas so that you can start to really think through how you might pull this off. If you don't, you're going to be at the impact of the gatekeepers who own other systems. And I think sometimes influencers think that they really have it when they get a system and they're on a platform and they really have a lot of followers. I know some people with huge followings, millions of followers, hundreds of thousands of followers, millions of followers, lots of people, but they don't own the platform. At any moment, any of those platforms can be taken away from you. At any moment, you could have somebody who comes in and decides that they want to advertise to your people who are interested in your product or your service because you do not own the platform. So there's a lot to be considered here. So here's my bio and my website in case you're interested in learning about my platform. We're in the early stages of platform building. I'm not super familiar with the AirMeet system, so I don't know if people can raise their hands or how that exactly works, but I don't see any messages in the messenger area. Is there a way for them to raise their hands and ask questions or no? I don't know. All right. All right, guys. Well, that was most of my talk for today.
Hello, Ellen. Sorry to interrupt. That you have an audio issue, Ellen. So please check again. Your voice is not audible.
All right, let's try this down. Let's hope this works.
Now you are audible.
Can
Yes.
you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah, please continue.
Okay. All right. So, oh, there, look, now I see a bunch of, I see a bunch of messages. Let's see if there are any questions in here. In what ways does inclusive leadership create unity without suppressing individuality? Inclusive leadership create unity without suppressing individuality.
Is
Well,
Ellen,
is that a question for me?
yeah, do you want to share your PPT again?
Sure, sure.
Yeah, please.
All right, there we go. So in what way does inclusivity, I think, does it create unity without suppressing individuality? I don't know how inclusivity could and possibly suppress individuality, because inclusivity would increase everyone's right to be heard and understood and have input into whatever the project or process or presentation or whatever was happening. So my way of looking at it is, if you don't have a diverse team and you don't allow for the team to be expressive and creative and have input, then you aren't going to get a very strong team, because people aren't going to feel valued, and they aren't going to feel, and they're not even contributing fully. So that would be my perspective on that. What role does emotional intelligence play in building unified communities? Well, emotional intelligence is one of the most important elements, I believe, in building any community. Because if you don't have emotional intelligence, then you're just going to run roughshod over other people's feelings and probably be harsh and with them, and you're going to end up hurting people's feelings, and it's just going to shut them down. So I think my team, we sort of let everybody has input, everybody has a voice, everybody has a way of speaking to each other that's respectful and allows them to, debate if we have debates, and we vote on things if necessary. And we also are just we just like different perspectives. So we have a pretty diverse team in my group. We've got pretty much people from all different backgrounds, on the team. So I really like that. All right. How do women leaders navigate unity in male dominated spaces? Well, I don't know how you would navigate unity in a male dominated space, because I work mostly in tech, but um, I think maybe I'm wrong, but I think the theme of what I signed up for was empowering voices shaping global change. So my talk was based on that. I keep seeing this unity harmony theme pop up. So maybe the theme changed perhaps from the time that I was originally joined until now. So I'm sorry, I'm not prepared to talk about unity, because that wasn't really a theme I was thinking of. However, in male dominated spaces, I think my experience has been that there are plenty of men who are more than willing to work with females. And then there's just a handful of them that are really difficult. And I pretty much just sidestep those people in general and just work with the people that I have the opportunity to work with. Now, if you're an employee and you don't have much power, whereas I'm a CEO, I get to choose who I work with. If someone's disrespectful to me or someone on my staff, I take action on that myself, because that's the level I'm functioning at. But if you're younger and you don't have as much going on in your career, then what you would do is gain more skills. And I think one of the most important things to do is keep looking for what you want to do and pivot from one thing to the next. So one of the things I used to do when I was younger, when I was in my 20s and I was in a corporate job, is I would look at all the job listings every week. I wasn't necessarily looking for a job, but I looked at all the job listings. And what I would do is I would do a mental sort of gymnastics, where I would look at what was the job asking for? What skills did you have to do this job? And then I would compare it to the skills I actually had. And I would say, well, if I wanted this job, I would have to do this and this and this and this. And then I would look for trends. For instance, a lot of analyst jobs were asking for the same set of skills over and over. Didn't matter what you were analyzing. You might be analyzing technology or analyzing financial documents, or you could be analyzing processes, but they were all asking for similar skill sets. And so what I would do is I would take note of that, and then whenever the opportunity presents itself where I could get one of those skills, then I would do that. And I'll tell you how I used to do it. I worked in projects, so I would be sometimes faced with projects where I did not know the technology. And so I would say to my boss, well, I'll be happy to take this project, but I want you to send me to a class on this technology so that I make sure I know the technology as well as possible. And they were often willing to send me to classes. So that's how I sort of navigated through that. I also learned that men and women explain things very differently and speak very differently. And I learned and trained myself to speak extremely succinctly, because males really liked very, very short sentences. So I learned how to speak as succinctly as possible. So are there any other questions? All right, I'm trying to look.
Yes, sorry to interrupt, and your voice is not audible again. Yeah, can you please check your internet connection and mic, please?